Okay, shall we hit record then? Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Hello, Canada.
Mehek.
Hello. Hello, welcome.
Mehek.
Welcome. So welcome everybody to Studio 116 and of course to our friends online in the UK and in Canada. We're truly an international group. Yeah. So thank you, Monirre, for agreeing to talk to us today about all this wonderful work which has been happening. And actually, it appears that we are doing this at a very important time. As I understand, your book sales have now moved into 4 digits.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
So we're celebrating that as well today. Yeah. So well done.
Thank you.
Well done. So tell us, I know we've got a studio audience, we've got a lot of questions, but before we get there, tell us a little bit. So how did we go from accountant, financial consultant to author? How did it happen?
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I know you've dedicated your day to this, even though you're here for an hour or so, but it's taken you a whole day. So I really appreciate all of you being here. So one day I was approached by training, I'm a chartered accountant. So one day I was approached by a mentor come friend who said that, why don't you write something for me? I said, why? He said, my editor is off sick, so I need somebody to write just me a 1 page on current affairs. And he knew that I was quite into current affairs, and we always used to talk about it. So just write anything. I said, look, I don't write. I can talk as much as you want, but writing is not my thing. So no, just write me anything, on what's happening in the country today. So I said, okay. So I wrote a 1 page A4 size piece of opinion on current affairs, and I gave it to him, and he tweaked it, he published it. And then he wouldn't leave me alone. His editor in due course passed away because he was not well. So he said, look, you continue writing. So over the course of next 10 years, I ended up writing 3,000 plus editorials. And that set me on that path. Before that, I had never written except perhaps 1 newspaper article back in 90s, which was published, but then that was a political analysis. So writing was never something I was going to do. And then I moved into a think tank business, if you like, where a lot of my work involved analyzing and writing and producing policy papers. So that helped. And then while I was doing that, I had all of these ideas about what was wrong with Pakistan. That's where it all started. In terms of the politics, in terms of the management, in terms of the economy. So I wanted to write about that. But nobody wants to read something about economics, or just politics. So I decided I'll create a story. So this started in about 2011. Now, those of you who know about Pakistan would know that 2011 was also the time when Pakistan's establishment was launching Imran Khan. So the book pretty much covers how, even though it was written totally independent of what was happening, so it could just well be a story about how Imran Khan, came into power and how he was helped by social media and all. So all that is part of my first book as to how I would do it. But in my book, it was a businessman, entrepreneur becoming a politician, and that was obviously a sportsman. The other thing was that it talked about what was wrong with the country as part of the story. And the book starts with a note saying, it's called Road to Hell. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. So this guy starts with a reformist agenda that he's going to fix the country. And the popular sentiment is, and was at that time, that all that is wrong is because of US influence. So he starts trying to fix that, and things go wrong. And it ends up pretty much destroying the country.
Don't tell us the ending, Monirre.
Yeah?
I'm sure everybody wants to read
but
it.
No, it's not actually. It's not, because when you read the book, you would find there are quite a few twists. So it starts with political agenda and becomes something totally different.
Okay. So this was the start point.
Yeah,
In terms
that
of
was
books, yeah.
Conceived 13 years ago. Started writing in 2013. So 2 years it just sat there, and then it took me 2 years to finish it.
Okay.
So yeah, that was the starting point. And then I decided, okay, I can do this.
Right.
So
that
then
was that gave you the.
Yeah.
All right, and we've got quite a range of work after that. Yeah. Do you want to just talk us through some of the
Sure.
the other books that you?
Okay, so that was one, and then I decided I would write a sequel to it. But then when I did the market survey and response, this is essentially a conspiracy theory. The demand for appetite for conspiracy theory novels was limited. So I wanted to address a wider audience. So even though this has sort of a sequel in False Flag, but that came much later, I thought of a murder mystery. And this was, again, most of my stories start with what's actually happened. So in my first murder mystery, Nangi is actually Urdu word, means naked. So it's about, actually this happened, that a woman was paraded naked in a marketplace. So I took that as a starting point of my story as to why it happened, and then it goes into all the things behind it. It's a crime story. So it starts, when it's a crime story, again, when I started writing crime stories, my first thing was how to engage the audience. Because if you open the book and you can't get into it, then you're not going to read it. So it has to be something which gets you invested into the story pretty much straight away. So therefore, it has to be a murder, which starts right at the beginning, and then everything else flows from there. So this is what happens. A body is found, and then the investigation starts, and then it goes from there. Okay. So again, in this part of all my stories, I have some kind of a subtext. So in this was the problem of human smuggling, and how that's part of the problem we have. So a murder that happens, and how it develops. And even I didn't know when I started the story. I thought, okay, so this woman is found dead, and the murder is being investigated, but who killed her? So until the last quarter of the book, I would say last 20%, even I wasn't sure who was the murderer or who I was going to pin it on. So as I went through it, and then the actual murderer, and when that happened, the story completely changed. So then I had to tweak the whole story, because I had started with one bad guy, that he's going to be the killer. But then, it continued. So let me put it this way. What I find is that stories take a life of their own. And they evolve themselves. That is the way I write. So even though I start with a story, an idea, but that's not necessarily how it would end up. So let me just come here and go to Marshall. Now, Marshall, I actually wanted to write about the issue of blasphemy-related killings in Pakistan, and also about the journey of the Holy Prophet to Mecca, from Mecca to the skies. But what I found was that there was a different story there. So again, the story started with the concept of something different, and then it evolved into a murder mystery. And again, it started originally based in Lahore, but then in the end, I turned the whole story around. It starts in Shoka in Ras Al Khaimah. So it starts there, and then from there it continues all the way, through Canada and Dubai, Canada. So there are 3 countries involved. Eventually, the Interpol is involved. So all of that happens. So what I find interesting is that the stories acquire a life and a momentum of their own. So that's how it happens.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So now my latest book, Zagan. This is again, this was a story which started with some people. Well, it's a story I heard about actual supernatural happenings. And then I decided I'm going to weave that into a story. And I started that, and then I realized that it's a tough call, turning supernatural into something of human element interest. So it's not a pure supernatural story, it's a murder mystery, but with the help of supernatural. So that's, if you like.
Wow, okay. And I can actually say something about this one here in Honey, which I read pretty recently. And what I can actually say is that I had a car journey from Italy to Austria, and I was reading this book on the way, and I've never known a journey go as quickly. I was absolutely gripped. I was riveted by this story. Very quiet, as my co-travellers will vouch. Yeah. So would you apply the same thing to this one, that it acquired a life of its own as you were?
It does. Yeah. It did. Again, the story originated in a person who had traveled from Sunderland, where I studied.
Yeah.
So I used that as a point. And then she comes to Pakistan and then disappears. And her uncle and aunt, where she was staying, are least bit bothered about her disappearance. So it starts from there, and turns out that there are very powerful people involved. So the story again starts escalating. Again, this story was originally meant to be chase, whereas this girl is being rescued, and the chase, they're being chased through the whole of the country and some of the neighboring countries, but then totally changed into something different. So yes, I mean, and that's what I enjoy about it, that it's more often than not, it writes itself. So for me, the difficult part is to sit down and start pounding the keyboard. When I do that, things become easier. It's often what happens, okay, I'm going to read some newspapers before I do that. No, I'm going to answer some emails before I do that. So then that sometimes, so once I get down to it, I find it, and again, this is a big surprise to me, because 20 years ago, if you had asked me if I would ever write a book, I'd say, no way, Like I said, I'm by training an accountant, a numbers man. Give me a set of numbers, give me a deal to structure, a transaction to compile together, then I'm very happy. So somebody just asked me when these invites went out, he said, what happened to you? I mean, you were a finance person. I said, been there, done that, time to do something different.
I know, because I had some chats with people before, there were a few people that wanted to ask some questions. So shall we throw it open to our online and studio audience? Anybody like to go first?
Let me go first, because I've got to go.
Yeah.
So, I don't know whether you just may have to.
We'll repeat the question, yeah.
So, Munir, I often wonder, you described the journey that you had, and it was interesting to hear that, one of your books, I think it was your first one, took 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you get in starting a book, do you suffer writer's block?
So John is asking if Munir, when he starts to write a book, if he ever comes across writer's block.
Well, in small ways, every day. Like I said, I want to postpone it till tomorrow. But yes, there are times when I'm writing a book and then I stop writing, and I just put it away, and I just can't get back to it. So yes, it does happen. So like I said, for me, it's sometimes I would write, like this book which I just finished. It had been written for 6 months, and I had not gone back to look at it either, even look at it. So yes, it does happen. But my focus has been in past year or so to finish the pending work. So I've disciplined myself. And again, what I have learned from other writers like Brandon Sanderson and Stephen King, they all say the same thing, that you have to have a discipline whereby you dedicate a certain, it's like a job. So you say at 9 to 5, I'm going to write, and then I do other things. So most writers usually have a block of 3 hours, in which they write, and then they take a break, and then maybe another block of 3 hours. In my case, it's usually one block of 3 hours, and that I'm done. So yes, it does happen.
One more.
I was going to ask.
I have a question.
Okay, online,
Okay,
Margaret.
Margaret.
Yeah, I'm in here. When you said when you've got an idea to write your book and it's in your head, and then, as John said, the first one took 2 years. I guess the more current ones didn't take so long. But what I was wondering is, when you're out and about socializing, or you're watching the news on television, or things happen in your life, do you somehow use that as a trigger and that filters into your book? Do some of the things that happen to you outside of your 3-hour writing block end up in your book?
Always, Margaret. So first book took 2 years straight, but my last book, I give you an example of the journey of sort of from inception or conception to finishing. And I was checking the dates when I actually started doing research on that. Where is that?
Which one is it?
No, it's not here actually. Yeah, that book is yet to come out. Oh. But it was November 2022 when I first sent a questionnaire to a forensic scientist about the issues I wanted to address in that book. So November 22 I wrote, and I sent the final draft to the publishing company editors about a week ago. So that's straight 2 years and 2 months. So the time actually hasn't gotten short, but that's partly because I have other things I'm working on. But from inception to publication, it's a usually 15-month turnaround period. Now coming to what you said, so this book, Zagan, the idea for this came from a story my nephew was telling me when he had gone to Bermuda and Trinidad and all those places. So he claims, I don't necessarily believe that he had some supernatural experience and observations. So that was in my mind, and then I eventually found a story where I could put this in, and that's how it happened. So yes, all the time, most of the stories I write, usually I take my inspiration from things that have happened, and then I put them into the story to how it can be something which people can read about.
And are any of the characters based on people that you know? Careful.
Well, in my existing books, the first book, like I said at the beginning, is very much like somebody like Imran Khan and the President of Pakistan, Musharraf, who are more or less portrayed in that book, but with different names. But in most of my recent works, no, I don't use people I know, except one book which might come in future, and I might, with the permission of the people, have them in the book. But otherwise, it's characters I create. Let me share something with you here.
It will cost.
About this project we were talking about, Catherine and her son or us. What I find is if I write about people I know, or if I incorporate that, then they may not like the way I portray them. So that would, it's a sensitive issue. If I write something about, Margaret might say, why does he say things like that about me? So because of that delicacy of nature of this, I think, having considered it, I think I'll probably not do it. I value my friends too much. I value my friends too much to jeopardize it. And actually, in my next project, it was going to be both you and Steve-O in the book. And Steve-O didn't have a very nice thing to say to John. So I thought, maybe, not a good idea.
Brilliant. Thanks, Munir.
Other questions?
So John, you were asking something.
I was just going to ask something along those lines, actually, just one more, which is, so do you see this continuing for a period of time, like almost forever, or is there just one more project and then finish?
So John is just asking, in case people can't hear, does Munir see this continuing forever, or is he thinking just maybe one more project, or what does he see? Is it infinite? What do you think?
Well, two things. One is I've already got 20. So what I do is, when I think of something, I just write it down, usually on my phone, and then save it, and then follow it through. So if I have an idea, like we're discussing, and if I come up with an idea, as soon as I get a chance, I would write it in a notepad in my phone. And then I would, at some point of time in next week or so, put a one-pager in my ideas folder. So there are right now 20 pending ideas.
Wow. Okay.
So if it takes me 18 months to finish one book, so that's what, 30 years right there. So I'm set. The other was that, unfortunately, this doesn't stop. I mean, and it's not necessarily a good thing. So my mind, even though I'm doing something else, it's continuously writing its own story. So then when I get back to my computer, it's all ready to come out. So even in social settings, when I'm talking to people, at the back of my mind, the story is usually writing itself, if you like, So call it a gift, call it a curse, I don't know what you would call it, but it's become a habit now, I think.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. The questions. Oh, Karen, go for it.
Monet, you talk about supernatural being a prominent feature of this book. Can you tell us a bit about how that's manifested? And the other part of that question is, I see you've got animals in front, are they connected to the supernatural element?
All right, so my brother is online. So it's his son who actually gave me the idea. The three animals are, well, that will be giving away the, that will be a spoiler alert. But I'll tell you how the book starts. So there's this man in Nottinghamshire. There's a private zoo, and he's a zoo employee in Nottinghamshire. And he's sitting in his shack at the back of the zoo, smoking mushrooms. And an owl flies in and sits on the tree outside or his cottage window and starts talking to him. And he says to himself, I got to stop smoking these mushrooms because I'm now hallucinating. So and then the book actually stops there, the supernatural part, and then there's a murder. And then the murder is connected to the supernatural. And then it sort of goes in a circle. And then, so once I was done with that book, I found that I am still not done with it. So now, like I said, that second part of that book is continuously writing itself and waiting to come out. But I can't do that right now because I've already started another project. So that would have to wait till I'm able to find more time. Yeah. So yeah, supernatural, again, something that I don't know how much of that would, like I said, it starts as a supernatural and then the story, like I said, acquires a life of its own. So I don't know how to put it better, but that's what happens. That I would start it as that and then I've got no control over it. So I'm not responsible.
Okay, thank you. More questions? Anybody? Yes. Well done.
Hi. Do you face writer's block? Like you're stuck, you don't know what to do, and then what do you do? What's your process?
Yes. Process is usually, what I found that helps is just give it up for a period of time. I just don't open that folder where I've written it. And then when I start writing something else, I start working on something else, I say, all right, hang on a second. So what's happened many times is that I've left a book unfinished. Like, let me just portray it here. These two books, that's what happened. False Flag and Bremerton Cornwall. So I was writing False Flag as a pretty much sequel to my first book, and then I just suffered a writer's block. And it's partly because the story wasn't going the way I wanted it to go. So, and I just couldn't write what the plot was telling me to write. So then I started, when this was happening, the COVID started. So then I started writing about this. When I was writing this, I said, hang on a second. So when I got a writer's block here, I went back to this. Yeah. And then I picked up and then finished both of them. So it actually works out for me.
Yeah, who does your artwork? They are very cool.
I have a company, my publishers are in India, fantastic people, and they do phenomenal work. So yeah, it's an Indian company and they do a fantastic job. So they do everything, from marketing to from editing, designing the covers, putting it together, and then putting it on social media. They do everything. And they're, like I said, they're fantastic.
Any more questions?
Monirè,
Yeah.
what medium do you write in? Do you use an inkwell and a quill, or a typewriter, or blood, or what?
Steve, you know, it has to be blood.
Okay.
Yeah, I use a stone to take some out, and then I write with it, and then
Whose blood?
my wife's.
Okay.
And that's why I've dedicated my first book to her, because it's her blood that all comes out.
Another question, can you write 2 books at once, or hold several ideas?
Yes, yes, there was a time when I had 3 books, like when you're cooking, right? So you got butter chicken, and you got chicken tikka masala, and you got bindi, all cooking. If I would understand. So they're all cooking, but they all can't be finished at the same time. So like I said, telling Handan, that when I suffer from a writer's block on one project, then I start another, and then come back to it. And that's why what happens sometimes is that I finish 2 or 3 books in a shorter period of time than I would have otherwise. But then it's not because I have written it faster, it's only because, some of the work was already done. And then, I didn't have time to finish it, or I had a writer's block. So then I managed to overcome that and then finish it.
Okay, that's good multitasking.
Very.
Thank you.
Catherine, I've got a question.
Yes, Avril, go ahead.
Hi. Monirè, have you met any other people who've successfully transferred their skills the way you have? So, for example, you said you're a numbers man, and then suddenly you found you were able to be a writer. I'm the opposite way around. I can create things, and I do create things, mostly music, but I'm definitely not a numbers woman, and I wouldn't go anywhere near that kind of area because I just feel automatically that I would not be able to do it. So what made you have the impetus to think, I'll have a go at this?
Well, I mean, in my case, because I was the gentleman who pushed me into that direction, I think he saw something which I never did. And he was, when I met him, he was in his late 70s. And he was a lifelong, one of the first newspaper editors in the country. And he had done that for 50 plus years. So when I met him, he probably saw something and decided, okay, I'm going to, he mentored me. And like I said, I was never going to write, but he gave me sort of an assignment and coaxed me into writing something. And it was very simple writing. It was current affairs. So I think in my case, I was sort of guided down that path by a mentor, even though at that point of time, I was very busy with my finance and business and accounting and all those engagements. But to his credit, I actually found time to do that. So while I was busy, sometimes I would be traveling, sitting at an airport and writing an editorial for him, because he had made me get into that. So that's what happened to me. The other person I know who inspires me that way is right here, John Bentley, because I see he has re-engineered himself. Has done such a phenomenal job of becoming a renowned leader in life coaching and emotional.
Well, I've known John Bentley, for 56 years and 57 years, and I concur with what you say about him.
We want to hear more about that, but off the meeting.
Off screen. So would you say, Monirè, that there's a book in all of us?
In all of us?
Yeah.
Well, definitely. And like I said, I actually have written the first few pages of it, or first chapter of it, actually. Okay. And then I stopped and I said, John is going to kick me if he reads that. And James is going to, punch me. And Hassan is just going to throttle me. So I said to myself, do I want to do this? And you are in there, Karen and Guy.
Karen.
And Handan is in there. Yeah? So I said, these are all my friends, and then I would have no friends left. So
Are you sure they weren't Lebanese?
And I have a question, Medea, on that point. Do you find, you say your novels write themselves while they get up? Would you say that your novels are character dependent about type scenarios, or more dependent, I don't know, a Lee Childs and a Jack Reacher type novel? Which way do you tend to go, or is it 50-50?
well, I'd say right now, all my books are plot driven. So there's that. But all of them have central characters. So all my 5 murder mysteries have Detective Amber, and she is the center detective who investigates, like Alex Cross for James Patterson or Jack Reacher for Richard. So there is a central character around whom the story is revolving, and there is a plot. So 50-50 would be a better description of that.
You
Handan.
had a question, Handan?
Yeah, is it but not emotionally challenging as well? I know we have the AI expert here, but like because you write about murder, crime, and it's like the victim, and how do you kind of isolate this?
Emotionally challenging. Well, yes and no. Partly because I've read, I think, a couple of thousand books over the past 40 years. So because you've read so much, the idea becomes, it's not emotionally chafing. Because when you read about a murder in newspaper, it affects you. But if you read it in novels, and if you've been reading about it, like I said, for 4 decades in my case, my first book I read was pulp fiction, if you like, an author called James Hadriches, back in 1970s. And then from there, I moved to Jeeves, who is the writer? P.G. Wodehouse. Yeah. So from James Hadriches, which was all detective murder mysteries, I moved to P.G. Wodehouse, who is considered modern-day Shakespeare. And I love that. And if I could, I would love to write more comedy, humor, but that's something I've not been able to develop. Yes, Guy?
And also, is there any subject
Wow. That's taboo. Hello.
Yeah, no. Simple answer is no. And I've written some things which, if I was living in Pakistan, would get me stoned to death. I mean, because I'm quite liberal with my ideas and what I say. Some of the things I've written, I actually could not live in Pakistan and be safe. Literally, it's not possible. But because I live in a country like UAE, it's possible for me to be completely free, to write what I want. And yes, there's no subject which there are many subjects which I would never write about because I can't, as much as I want to, because I just simply don't have the knowledge. But no, there's no subject I would avoid because of any other reason. Yeah, Hisham.
How it started in 2011, had it in your mind for 2 years, kind of writing. I just want to understand more of the journey that you had kind of to transition from your old job to doing what you're doing right now, because that can take a lot of a lot of challenge to actually do this shift. And how did that happen? Like, did you do it as you were working in your job, and then at some point you resigned, and you continued? Or
Don't listen.
So it's a very insightful question. Yes. So when I started writing the book, I was always writing. By then, I was always writing because I was writing for the newspaper, and then I was writing for my company, consultancy firm, the research reports. So I was doing some kind of writing. And then when I started writing the book, I was doing it while I was working. And I continued to do that until COVID. So when COVID happened, I had plenty of time. And the work I was doing, was not as demanding. So my work habits also changed. My work demands changed. So it was not as demanding for me, so I had more time. And eventually what happened was that consultancy work I was doing, I was finding it less and less satisfying. And financially I was in a place where I could afford to now do it more full time. But a lot of people ask about how much money you make by writing. So writing books for me has never been about making money. It's now only that we are seeing the numbers picking up, but it's never been about money. So it was never something which could substitute my living income. It was always something I did on the side until I got to a point where it could at least help somewhat. Guy.
Is there any text that you've given up on? It just does not seem to be able to get traction.
Not.
Or do you put anything like this in the cooler until it comes back to life for you?
Well, there are a couple of ideas which I started off with, like Karen asked me about supernatural. I started with a supernatural idea about there's this story, it's a folklore in Pakistan. So I started on that, then I decided it needs more commitment, more thinking. And there were other ideas which were, fast moving. So sadly, I went with the fast-moving ideas. Yeah. So that's what I have not given up on them. So what I do is my process is I put it in a folder. So I went back and when I finished my 8th book, so okay, what do I start on now? So this whole 20 ideas, and some of them were just one paragraph, and then I picked one, which I was telling you, starts in Scotland, where murder happened. So now, hopefully, I'm moving from my Pakistan-based detective and stories to a Scotland-based story, which then takes you around all of UK, and then it develops from there. So, but I've never given up on an idea. I've never started a book and not finished it. So all the projects I started, they've all been finished. There are some which are at 1 chapter or 2 chapter level, but they're part of my work in progress.
Any more questions?
One last question.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Margaret, go ahead.
It's mostly for Riz. I want to know, is it more fun living with an author than it was an accountant?
Margaret, what gives you the feeling that he stopped being an accountant?
But she's saying he's still an accountant.
Okay.
The numbers never stop.
The numbers never stop, she's saying.
Which
I thought it might be more.
different point. It occurs to me, Munir, that first sponsor that you had, who saw something
Mentor,
in you,
yeah.
Mentor, yeah.
First
your
mentor.
Manza.
Yeah.
Your mentor knew you as an accountant.
Yeah.
I just wonder whether you were a very creative
Accountant. Creative accountant.
And if you were, she's still doing the books, could you do
Can you
ours?
hire you?
Okay, let me answer that. He knew me as an accountant and as a finance person, but my strength has always been transaction structuring. So call it creative accounting. So now that you asked me, I'll take this opportunity. So the first ever reverse takeover, which happened in Pakistan, I engineered that. And first ever hostile takeover that took place, I engineered that and I was part of that team to execute it. So, but to answer your question, I was always more into transaction structuring and how to create transactions which were not norm. Not creative accounting, but creative transaction structure.
Okay.
That was my forte.
That explains it.
Can I ask a question? If there was one bit of advice you would give to anybody that maybe thinks that they want to venture into this world at some point, what bit of advice would it be?
Go ahead. I mean, it's a fantastic idea. For me, I think I was telling you the other day, John, I just enjoy it so much. So, and I've discovered it, so I'm fortunate. And thanks to Mr. Manza, who led me, that I've discovered it. And when I sit and write, I just love it. Just pounding away. And like I said, then the words start flowing themselves.
Take that
Challenge
step.
is, challenge is to go there, sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write. and there are days when I don't write. I want to write, and the part I hate most is editing my own work. And it's not one editing. So that's the challenge for people who want to write, Meher, like you were saying, is that when you read, when you've done your first draft, and the big writers like Brendan Sanderson, Hassan, they say that you should never show your first draft to anybody, not your wife, not your advisors, anybody, because your first draft is usually rubbish. So then when I write my first draft, then I continuously have to go back and improve it. So that's what happens.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, hello.
How do you balance your research with, you mentioned for, I think, Zagan, that you'd reach out to a forensic scientist. So how do you balance your research versus your storytelling? Is it like a 50-50 split in your day? Is it dependent on the book?
Well, it depends on the book. Some books I have done very little research for. For example, my first book. Now, where is that sucker? Yeah, for Road to Hell, I actually hired a defense expert who was an expert in military strategy, because a lot of this book involved a military aspect. So I hired an expert who was expert in the aeronautics and the aviations, and he gave me a whole bunch of answers to my questions to make the book happen. So yeah, but the other books, a lot of other books, I had the knowledge or the information which I reproduced, and then there's Uncle Google, as my uncle used to say. So I do that. And then, like for my latest book, which is going to come out in a few months, I actually consulted a forensic scientist because the murder that was to happen had to be obviously something different than somebody putting a knife into somebody. And it happened, this murder happens in a, this is not a spoiler because it's the beginning of the book, happens in a closed room. The room is closed from inside, and this 17-year-old boy is dead, and no visible signs of any injury. So I had to then engage a forensic specialist as to how I could make that believable and come up with an idea which would work scientifically. It's just not bullshit. Sorry. So yeah. In terms, to answer your question, in terms of the time division, I would say 20% is actually professional research, 20 to 30% is my own research, and then 50% is just pure writing. So 50, 30, 20.
Amazing. Thank you.
Okay.
Which one is the most challenging for you?
Challenging?
Sorry, but I'm going to have to leave now. Sorry to leave you guys. Enjoy.
See you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, John.
Saudi bound. Okay.
You have 7 books, right?
7, yeah.
So which one is the most challenging?
Challenging in terms of writing?
Yeah.
Challenging was, Mashallah, because there are too many twists in this plot. So when I started, it was a simple story about a person attempting to open the 4th dimension. But then it changed, like I said. Then it became a simpler story. But a lot of the story focus, a lot of my books have subtexts and themes which are below the surface. So one of the subtexts of this book was the power of human mind. So, and how you can use your brain power or mind power to unlock other dimensions. So that was actually the idea. But some of these ideas are very difficult to put forward in a non-scientific way. So if I was writing a scientific paper, it would be easier. But to engage you as a reader, I have to make it interesting. I have to make it human interest. To do that, then a story has to change. Otherwise, you're not writing a story, you're writing a thesis, a technical paper. So that's...
Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
My mom.
Yes, yes, Eileen, we can hear you.
Hello. I've been quietly listening to all of this. Okay.
Thank you.
And nice to see all of you. Yeah.
Great to hear from you, Eileen.
Pardon?
Great to hear from you.
Yes, thank you. I've started to read Blame It on COVID, Munir.
Yeah?
Yeah, just started. So I like murder mysteries, and so that genre, you seem to have written a few, so I've bought the first one. So I'll let you know what I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I hope everybody's well.
Thank you. So now, blame it on COVID. Some of my books, if you look at them, they have got a prologue, so you would actually see the ideas that inspired the book. For example, in Blame of the COVID, you'd see right at the beginning that there were actually 3 murders or 3 deaths that happened, and all those 3 deaths were categorized as caused by heart attack and this and that. So I decided that there's a story here, because there was a connecting thread to all those 3 people, which was they all were, problem for somebody. So I decided to weave that into a story. So what I think Margaret was asking about daily experiences. So this was something I read about in the newspapers, because these 3 murders actually happened in a span of 1 month, or 3 deaths that happened in a span of 3 weeks, just as the COVID had started. So I said, okay, we are going to make it that these deaths were blamed on COVID, but they were actually not. And then there's a whole story starts from there.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I think that probably brings us to the end.
Yeah.
Munir, thank you very much for spending time with us today and sharing some of your insights and experience. And we look forward to more fantastic things coming in the future. Yeah.
Thanks, Munire. Fascinating.
Thank you, everybody. Margaret,
Thank you, Munir.
Thank you.
Thank you to our international audience.
Yeah. Your friend
Avril.
Yeah. Thank you if you are there. And all of you. I mean, I know, like, it seems like you spend an hour here, but I know that you guys have dedicated your day to come here, especially Karen and a guy from all the way from Rashid. Rashid, thank you. All of you, you've come here. I'm honored that you took time out to come and be with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Catherine, for being such a great host.
Well done, Catho.
Unfortunately, you can't join us for afternoon tea, but we'll send you. We'll send you the pictures.
And everyone is not here, but to answer her question about starting another career, Catherine has just started another career as a anchor person and an interviewer.
Kate Burley has quit at Sky News.
I know.
There's an opening there.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Enjoy your afternoon tea.
Thank you, everybody.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Well, I'm sure everybody's ready for something to eat and drink. So if you want to I'm hoping that the ladies will have done everything. Yeah. If you want to make your way through to the back, and we'll switch this off. Sadly, John is not joining us for refreshments. He's had to run. There you go.